Well, hello everyone. What a warm welcome and energizer. Thank you so much for joining us. As you heard, this session will revolve around disruptive innovation and entrepreneurship. And really what we want to talk about is how healthcare landscapes are changing with the adoption of healthcare innovation, mainly through new innovative technologies, and how really that is leading to, improved in outcomes, in the different options that patients have. So we have here, you heard an amazing panel. I'm going to do a quick introduction. So Ignacio Medrano, you are an MD, a neurologist, and you founded, we were talking about 10 years ago, Savannah, one of the visionaries in Spain in artificial intelligence and also with your company. And you've also been named many things in the Spanish ecosystem by Forbes, a creative entrepreneur, and many other awards. So we look forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you.
And we have Álvaro Sánchez Leuco. He's also an MD that co-founded Leuco with 3 other entrepreneurs after going to the MIT. We were discussing as well how they're going back and forth to the US with their startups. And also 10 years ago, so both of them are very seasoned entrepreneurs, so it's going to be a great panel. So with that said, I think that it's Leuco.
It's the same company? Yeah, Leuco.
Yes. She's not here. I was going to say that she's unable to join. And no worries, unfortunately, she wasn't able to join because of COVID. So hopefully that clarified that, but actually it's a good segue to my question, which was, could you introduce your respective companies and what you do? So maybe we can start by Leuco.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Thanks to Astra, thanks to EIT, thanks to the South Summit organizers, Nach as well, and thanks to you as well. Leuco is a medical device company. We are developing the first non-invasive device to measure white blood cells. You know that when you go to do like a blood draw, you get measured like these leukocytes or white blood cells. Those are the cells that defend us against infections. Specifically, we are targeting a subtype of this white blood cell that is called neutrophil, and this is the one that protects us against bacterial infections. And this is very important for specifically patients with chemotherapy or receiving treatments for cancer. This cell can go very down and they can have infections. So we are developing a non-invasive microscope. We image an area here on the finger. We see the capillaries and we see the cells passing by. And it's the first time that we are being able to, evaluate this in vivo without having to take any blood. So it's non-invasive, completely non-invasive, just with optics. And this is what we are doing, but obviously we have a vision and aspiration of expanding to other areas, not only like chemotherapy, which is our first use case, but also to other blood parameter determination for other applications.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. At Savannah, we have been 10 years analyzing and mining medical records using machine learning and especially natural language processing. And 10 years later, we're doing this in 13 countries, in 250 hospitals between the Americas and Western Europe. The very obvious reason why we do this is because we want to do predictive analytics. We want to understand how patients and disease are going to behave at individual level. And in medical records, you can find many variables. You can find many data points with which you can create these predictive models. So that's more or less the ecosystem in which we operate.
Thank you so much. So as you see in the title, the first part of it is disruptive innovation. So maybe we can start by sharing some thoughts on that. And as we can see, healthcare is a fertile ground for innovators. We're all moved by the possibility of helping patients and the unmet needs. Technological advances are helping us figure out new companies, or new use cases to be solved. But also, it's very important to understand the healthcare landscape. And I think today, the fact that we have 2 MDs that are also entrepreneurs and that are leading technological companies, it's marvelous to think about that. So when I think about disruptive innovation, I think that these 3 components, kind of an Venn diagram, have to be together: the clinical need, the technology, and understanding the healthcare market. That's my unique way of seeing disruption and opportunities, but I would like to hear from you. How would you define disruptive innovation? And based on the solutions that you have defined, how are you unlocking that?
I fully agree with your definition, and thanks for the question. In our case, I will probably also add doing things in a new way, no? So, and also like doing a paradigm shift. To be a little bit more tangible, what that means in our case, no? This means that, for example, when we evaluated the unmet need, and we evaluated that the febrile neutropenia, which is these infections associated to like this decrease in the neutrophils, we were discussing possible solutions, and we were technology agnostic. We could have done like a finger prick, which is just like what diabetes people do to measure like glucose. We could have think of other things, but we thought that it was important to do like a paradigm shift, a change, and do this non-invasively, because that's what will enable a complete new use of technology and use of diagnostic tests in this case. Because currently, these finger pricking devices, you have to use them in the hospital. In our case, with this kind of innovation, we can move that to the home of the patient. And this is also a little bit one aspect of disruptive innovation that I think is worth highlighting, no? The possibility to enable like new things, do paradigm shift, no? And change, as you guys are also doing with AI. So.
Yeah, I think forecasting is very disruptive in healthcare. If you can anticipate what is going to happen a few months or years at almost individual level, I think that brings a big change, and it's something that medicine has been pursuing for a long time. The problem is that formerly we didn't have enough data, or we didn't have the ability to run models on that data, but now, as it's happening in many other industries, we have this data, in my case, health records, but it can also be multi-model, genomics, proteomics, and so on. And now we have machine learning, which everybody knows that is useful for doing these predictions. So what I'm saying is already proven. It's not the future. We now have articles that show, by ourselves and by other companies, that show that, for example, we can anticipate who is going to have Alzheimer's disease 7 years in advance. We can know who's going to have pancreas cancer years in advance, only by looking at medical records, or who is going to respond to a certain therapy, only by looking at medical records and figuring out how those points connect. I think that's a big change for doctors, and it's really going to change the way we do medicine.
So great thoughts on healthcare disruption, non-invasive at home, the power of data and prediction. It makes it sound easy, but we know how healthcare complexity goes and how future entrepreneurs or people involved in projects have to understand the healthcare system and all its complexities and sometimes as well inefficacies due to legacy systems. So I think that another key component is understanding how to create value. So maybe you can walk us through how you manage to create value for your solutions and for patients, and how you translate that understanding of the need of the technology in the impact of patients. So maybe Alvaro, you can start.
In terms of creating value, one key aspect probably that we have like identified through these years is like aligning all the key stakeholders. Obviously, the patient is in the center, so you have to create value for the person that is like affected by these conditions. Obviously, we are in healthcare, we are in medicine, so the patient is the most important thing, or the person like having these diseases. So obviously, you have to identify what are their needs, adapt the products to the needs of the patients, but it's also very important to consider all stakeholders. So when you incorporate all that feedback, you are able to create value for everyone. Because if not, it might be very difficult to translate the innovation to the actual patient, who is going to benefit most. So I think that this part of like being able to speak to all the stakeholders, understand their specific needs, and find a common ground to all of them, I think is critical. So I probably will mention that aspect as critical. Obviously, there are others, but I will let also Nacho comment.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of what we did. We partnered with the COPD Foundation, so chronic bronchitis in the United States, because in this country, out of around 40 million people who have this condition, only 20 million, only half of them are diagnosed. The other half are undiagnosed. And that has an impact because by the moment you diagnose them later than it should, the progress of the disease is making it more difficult to cure them, basically. So it comes with a big benefit to to do this with a predictive model. So we created this model, and it works. We have a good area under the curve. So what is the value we're adding here? We're adding value to the patients themselves. We're adding value to the pharmaceutical companies, which now will have a bigger arena where to put their drugs that are especially working well if you put them at the beginning of the disease. And we're bringing value to the hospitals, which now have a new tool to give to their intensivists, to their physicians, who will be able to do their work in a different way. So if you look at the chain, with just one algorithm, you can impact all three angles of the same healthcare ecosystem.
Wonderful examples, and actually we were talking as well on the backstage that Ignacio was in an interview, in El País, and one of the quotes that I read actually in the AVE coming here was that you predict that probably in the future the doctors or the hospitals that don't have an algorithm for taking decisions will be perceived as an hospital without an MRI. It will be very strange for hospitals to operate without this kind of tools, to predict and to really identify earlier the onset of the disease. So I think that that's a huge value creation for everyone in terms of workload, in terms of better clinical outcomes. So it's very inspiring, and I invite you to read that interview. It was a very good one. So now that we've touched upon a bit the complexity of healthcare innovation, I think that now it makes a lot of sense to go into the complexity of healthcare entrepreneurship. You've been 10 years really solving that problem, so it would be great to hear from you what have been the greatest challenges that you faced. Some of you are already in different markets, some of you are going from pre-revenue to revenue, so I'll let you choose what angle, but I think it would be great for the audience to hear about the challenges you encountered.
Yeah. In our case, we started thinking about this 10 years ago. The spin-off was in 2017, so you can imagine that in 10 years there are a lot of challenges. I guess that in our case, one of the biggest challenges is also we are a medical device. So creating the hardware, creating a physical product, that's very challenging, because the initial proof of concept studies that we did, we were using some off-the-shelf microscope that existed that did not work, because you were pressing the finger, you were not seeing the capillaries, so we did have to adapt the technology. At the beginning, the product was probably this size. We were progressively miniaturizing the device. So evolving the product physically was also a big challenge, because also the data that you get depends highly on the quality of the hardware product. So our algorithms depend on the physical product. So that was one obvious challenge. In terms of other challenges, obviously adoption, despite creating value in healthcare, and we are MDs, so probably I don't know, Nacho, you will disagree, but we tend to be conservative for obvious reasons. So that kind of, evangelization and education of the healthcare sector, so they understand also how to integrate this into their practice, is very important and very challenging. So you have to try to find a way to do this in a way that is not too disruptive, because the technology might be disruptive, but probably your initial deployment has to be a little bit less disruptive, in my opinion. We can disagree. Obviously, fundraising is a huge challenge as well. In our case, we were very successful, not as successful probably as you guys, but very successful in terms of the average. So that obviously is a very important factor, and also assembling a solid team, identifying the good talent. The team is key. So with a good team, probably you can solve all these other problems. So I think those are a little bit of the challenges that we have been facing these years. Yeah.
So we went through many of them, but I would choose, first of all, we have been operating in a market that didn't exist. So it was no one's job to buy predictive algorithms in healthcare, in hospitals. No one was doing that. Maybe pharmaceutical companies were a refugee for us, but with hospitals, it simply, they didn't have budgets. And that's now changing for the first time. We've been waiting for this 10 years. Now it's happening. Now hospitals are coming to the office to say, we want to buy predictive models. Wow, it's happening. Probably thanks to ChatGPT, I don't know, but it's happening. So that's one thing. The other thing is data sharing, because people get very nervous when you have to put data in the cloud, and if you don't do it, then you don't have the power, the computational power. But people tend to be very conservative with this, even if it's irrational, even if you explain them that data is anonymized, that it's for a good purpose, that you're going to do research, that the GDPR is supporting this. Even if all the checks are there, there's some psychological or cultural point to sharing the data, transferring the data out of the servers of a certain region. So that for us was a pain, and it's still a pain sometimes. It's becoming better, but that's there. And probably the third point is something that is coming now. It's like the next level of abstraction. We have the data, okay, we have the algorithms, and someone willing to pay for them. But how are we going to make sure that doctors use them in the clinical practice? And we were discussing this with you recently. Even if it works, even if it's proven, why doctors would use them? Because traditional algorithms without AI have been present for 30 years, but they don't use them because you're always in a rush. So implementation is an issue. And we have some ideas on how to solve this, but it's not going to be from one day to another, I think.
And maybe adding very quickly, and I agree 100%, also the regulatory barrier in healthcare is very important as well. So in our case, we are both pursuing CE mark and FDA approval. In our case, FDA seems a little bit stricter with medical devices. It might not apply, so there is always a little bit of debate on which kind of region is more strict or stricter. In our case, US seems a little bit more demanding, FDA, but that's also a barrier in healthcare for sure. But also good because they help you a lot in guiding how to deploy the technology.
I think that's a great point, the one you're raising, because the problem with this is that predictive models with AI in healthcare are following the regulatory box of medical device. They are being treated as if they were ECGs, machines, and they're not machines. But that's what we had as a society, and we put it there. But it's really not working. It doesn't fit because this is information. It's not a machine, and we're treating it as a machine. So I think that's delaying innovation.
Mm-hmm. So you alluded now to the difference between the regulation in the EU and the US, and you've alluded generally about the challenges of being in general in healthcare. Maybe Ignacio, since you've deployed operations, and we were talking about that as well, no? In the US, in Europe, and other markets, can you elaborate a bit on the opportunities of each one of them and how you can leverage those challenges to turn into opportunities?
Oh, yeah, I mean, big difference. Big difference. As you know, many of the books that come from Silicon Valley just don't apply here. And so specifically in our case, I just landed this morning from Chicago from the American Conference of Oncology, and we were discussing projects there. And the level of abstraction, the complexity of the projects that are admitted through the scope of innovation, I think it's still different. The willingness to take risk into doing things like something that, for example, we call transportability, where we can take data that is coming out of the clinical trials today, and we can create models that predict how the drugs market will behave in the future, taking into account the clinical trial that is taking place today. That's very innovative. And that is not that well accepted in Europe when we pitched that, even in front of pharma companies, with some very nice exceptions. But there we have been able to talk about this, and people were super enthusiastic, and they want to try. They want to go and try this very innovative way of doing things. So I still see a gap. And then what I already mentioned about the data transfer, which is not as easy in the US as people would think, but at least it's more clear. If you remove personal information, then you're good to go. While here, you remove personal information, and still someone in a French hospital has to say yes or no, depending on how much he trusts you or not. And that's not entirely clear for us as entrepreneurs.
Great. I really wanted to make that point, since both of you are doctors, both of you have some links as well to the US. So just to move on the last section of the discussion, let's focus now into the future. So today you explain the technology and the business that you have today. Can you give us a glimpse of what you think is next for your business and the uptake of your technology?
Yeah. In our case, obviously the roadmap of things that we can enable with this novel technology is to be able to evaluate other blood things, like, for example, hemoglobin, platelets, other like a differential cell count, and even see things, because I mean, we are now making visible something that before was invisible, which is microcirculation. So you can see that in vivo. That has also applications. I mean, I cannot disclose a lot because of proprietary info, but I mean, we can enable like a lot of potential like use cases, even with cell tagging, identification of other things that where we can expand the technology further to provide more value. So we see our technology as a platform to enable like this in vivo evaluation of microcirculation and blood cells in this first use case, but also with other like ramifications.
So in our case, I think that the future or almost present of AI is multimodal. It's mixing several data layers. And we've specialized in one, which is medical records. But what happens with the rest? Microbiomics, radiomics, CT scans, all together, that gives you more predictability. And we're going to that point. We're already arriving to the point where those data layers merge. Therefore, we have better prediction. And that is the next thing for us, how we partner with other people that are doing it very well with other data layers so that our prediction is better. And we need to find the first use cases in the market, because sometimes you're focused on your data, and the customers don't request this, so it's not that easy to jump into that. But yes, I'm very excited with mixing our medical records with, for example, liquid biopsies, or our medical records with companies that are doing genomics and things like that. I think that is going to improve the results a lot. So I'm really enthusiastic about this new step, which is going to involve more partners and is going to enrich the whole thing.
I'm smiling because I'm very happy of the two things that you mentioned. It's a line of work that we're pursuing. And I think we all can see how it's difficult to keep up with all the new partnerships, all the new things that are coming, that sometimes it's difficult to see what might come as next. Our team as well is very focused on multimodal. And we agree as well that it looks like it's the next wave, especially for oncology. So it was nice to hear that. And obviously precision diagnostics and the evolution that we will see on that end. So I guess that for the last couple of minutes that we still have, as you know, the audience, probably there's a blend of profiles. There might be entrepreneurs, corporates, investors. So if you could give one word of advice and one ask, what would those be? And I know we didn't plan for that question, so take your time.
Yeah, I mean, giving advice is always very tough, no? Because I mean, each one will have like their own like history or like needs. But obviously, I think that I mentioned that before, no? The importance of the team. I think in entrepreneurship, the team is critical because you might run out of funds. You might like have challenges in terms of developing the technology. You might have challenges like like deploying this into the market. But obviously, you have like a good and a strong team, so still humans. No, we have a strong talent to be able to solve this problem. So obviously, like be surrounded with a good team. No, the things that they tell you typically, I don't know, MIT and other areas is that is the team that you will go for a drink. No, so keep a good team, good dynamics. No, and everything can be solved, hopefully. And in terms of ask, I mean, obviously we don't have any specific ask planned here. Right now we fundraised very recently. We have received as well an SBIR grant in the US, which was also very good news for us. I'm just making a little bit of marketing here. So I guess that visit our website, know us, and if anyone is interested in knowing more, I'm happy to chat with you and also like consider like any future kind of collaborations opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, so my ask is probably related to understanding that the cycles in healthcare are a bit slower. It's a very regulated arena, and it's what it is. That's not going to change. And sometimes when we confront the startup ecosystem, we realize that the things we do are much slower. We're suffering that, and it's not always understood. Not only by investors, even by other partners, technological companies. But if you can understand that this is about going step by step because it's health and we have to be safe and so on, I think that's useful. And then in terms of advice, probably I would encourage anyone that wants to jump into healthcare, I will take it from there, to think that in healthcare, sometimes we don't follow the natural or the logical rules of the market. That's very important. You can have a great innovation that presumably would bring efficiency, yet it could not work. Because if it means firing nurses, no one's going to do it, even if it's rational, because it's politically unacceptable. So I've seen many companies fail because they had nice products and services that just were not accepted by the society because it's healthcare and it's very sensitive. I would be cautious with that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do you want to add then?
Very, very quickly, that also, because sometimes when we talk about healthcare, might sound a little bit, like discouraging, because long cycles, if you are sitting there and these guys are having 10 years there, in our case, we are still pre-commercial. But obviously, it's something that matters a lot to people. So obviously, that passion, that impact is also a good motivation for innovating in healthcare. So, yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much. We're almost out of time. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you also did, and learn about how healthcare disruptive innovation is actually happening behind the buzzwords, and how healthcare entrepreneurs as well are leading the way. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you for the organizers again.
Fantastic.